here to pay our kavod achron. It's a very beloved mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and a friend to many. Esther Bas Avraham, Aleha Hashalom. The pasuk says in beginning of near the beginning of Sefer Malachim, "Vayikrevu Yimei David Lamus, Vayitzav es Shlomo ben Olemor." David HaMelech was about to pass on, called in his son Shlomo Melech, and he told him, "Anochi holech b'derech kol haaretz v'chazaktu liyos leish." He said, "I'm going in the way of the land of the world, and you should be strong." What does that expression mean? Holech b'derech kol haaretz. Seems to mean that we know that when a person is alive, a person is always growing, always achieving. There's a she'ifa, there's a desire to grow, to become a greater individual. That ends, of course, at their patir. When they pass on, they're no longer holchim. We're holchim throughout our lives, and then when our lives end, we are no longer holchim. And therefore the pasuk is telling us that David HaMelech is telling Shlomo, "Anochi holech b'derech kol haaretz." I've been a holech, but now I'm passing that on to you. V'chazaktu liyos leish. But we live on our children and our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. And if they are holchim, if they are continuing in the path that we teach them, then we continue to be holchim as well. And therefore, it's very appropriate to suggest for Mrs. Pollak, although her time has come, she was zocha tarichas yomim b'shanim, a life of accomplishment, a life of fulfillment, a situacious chayil. But ultimately, her life does not continue because she lives on in her family, in her beautiful mishpacha, with tremendous, beautiful nachas and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So that's what the pasuk is telling us. Anochi holech b'derech kol haaretz. She could say as well, v'chazaktu liyos leish, be strong. Take all that she taught through her example, through her life, and the life of her husband, Aleha Hashalom, how they built together such a beautiful home, a home l'shem u'l'tiferes. I'd like to ask Rabbi Garfunkel Shlita Palid to share a few words.
Mrs. Pollak was zecher tarichas yomim. And everyone was zecher to that. She was zecher tarichas yomim. She was 94 yesterday. Would have been 94 yesterday. This time I was nifted yesterday. His yurtzeit was yesterday. Chov, vov, vov. Dit van Shabbos, big mile. And a Pollak Gemaisa yesterday. Someone was saying shir, and he said over a Maisa that three people were sitting together and arguing about the person that was nifter. Why is it true? Why is it true that for his children you sit 30 days, and for parents you sit a year? And he couldn't figure out why. Moshe says a terrorist to that kasha. Moshe said because for a parent you have a deed of kibbut aveim. If you have a grandfather or mother, you have to do kibbut aveim. Forget about all the other halachos. And he passed like that lemaisa, halach lemaisa. A woman that has what do you call it, that's sitting shiva, and her husband wants to go to a chasna. She can give herself to go to chasna because it's only a kibbut aveim. It's a tremendous thing, kibbut aveim. You have you anything. The Bible says if you have children, the children you're not to do any mistreat or anything as a parent. Why? Not because you can't be. So we shouldn't say because you can't be married, you can't be make too much, you can't be have it too availous. But the terrorist is the key of kibbut aveim is stronger than that. remember when Mrs. Pollak and her husband, Shalom, used to come visit every Friday night. Every Friday night. And of course, he used to try to sing, and she was there very quietly. She didn't want to take a chelik in the discussions. She let him just do all the discussions, and she was sitting quietly and listening. For such an Chayil, you have to kibbut aveim. And that kibbut aveim is stronger than anything else. For that, you didn't avail us for 12 months. Remember that. Kids sometimes think, mother, she's no mitzvahs. Well, I have mitzvahs to do. No, a mother and a father have a din of kibbut aveim. And you have to do chabad them. 100%. Esther Bas Avram was there to have a good life. She saw children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She witnessed them at Pearl. She also had a hard life. She went to the concentration camps, and therefore she had a hard life. But it didn't change her at all. She knew what she had to accomplish, and she accomplished it. It's a geweldige schus. A person should be able to, to be able to go up to heaven and say to them, I did what I was supposed to do. It's a geweldige schus when you get up there and say, I've done what I'm supposed to do. It's Chodesh El. 2 days is going to be Chodesh El. In Chodesh El, you have to do tshuva. Everyone has to do tshuva. What do you have to do tshuva for? To make sure that you didn't do anything wrong. She never did anything wrong. And if Teres was zeche to live out Kamad a whole year. She had difficult times, but she lived to come out a whole year. Comes now with Chodesh El, and now she has a fan for zich. Did I do tshuva? I think she can say the tshuva. Her husband was a very good person. Her husband was a big about tefillah and chedema. And therefore he was ready to be buried in a B'shat Mutzlachas in a good place. She'll be buried next to there. I hope. And it's a schus. Remember, this is true. What happens if someone's not buried next to his wife? Can you move him? That's the union of bearing next to a person. You live with a person all your life, if you're buried next to him. Her children took care of her gewaldig. They did whatever they could to help her. Whatever they could do, they did. And it wasn't only because of kibbut aveim, it was because of the fact that they loved her. They really loved her. Because the truth is, if it wouldn't be because of love, it's just anyway. As long as you're not adopted, then you have the whole kibbut aveim. It's no difference if you're a real mother or not a real mother. How good she was to you, how not good she was to you. But she was very good to them. And for that, they deserve to give a kibbut aveim. The Medrash, the Pollak says that David HaMelech, said he gave over, he went for a certain amount, and he gave over to Shlomo HaMelech. What does that mean? Now Shlomo HaMelech has mechuyev to do kibbut aveim. And he's mechuyev to do kibbut aveim, so therefore he has to do it 100% right. You want to put on tefillin? Put on tefillin whatever you want. Wear one pair of tefillin, two pair of tefillin, it's up to you. But kibbut aveim, there's no question how you have to do it. And it's a big mitzvah. A very big mitzvah. You have to do it for kibbut aveim for mother and for your father at the same time. Whenever you do kibbut aveim for your mother, you also for your father. You get credit for your father also. Your father can have tainas on to you. Why don't you do more? Because that's what you have to do. The person who's to live 90-some years, it's a schus. And she lived that long because she had a schus. Schus was during the war, schus was now, schus was after the war. And you see, it's a geweldige schus. Funny thing. A woman doesn't have to do mitzvahs. We all know that. She has to do it. Doesn't have to daven. Doesn't have to do other mitzvahs. All right? The Torah gives her credit if she doesn't. She came to shul to daven as much as she could. Wherever she could, she came to shul to daven. She had a lot of good friends. And her friends did not go to our shul. She went to other shuls. It made a difference to her. She came to our shul. It was a pal. She used to always sit at a certain seat. That's why she didn't come to shul. There was a right how long she would live. This person moved into our block. And across the street, he has to have someone help him go to shul. So every time you helped her go to shul, you got a mitzvah, a kibbut aveim. The mitzvah is now more than another mitzvah. She never had a fight with anyone. Pal de Gezach. She never had a fight with anybody. For that alone, she should go to Gan Eden. Can you imagine that a person doesn't have a fight with anybody? She was a tzaddikus. She was to live a chaim shel tzaddikim. And that's why she was to be nifter when she was nifter. The Yibam should see to it that children should continue to follow in the derech, and that'll be a bigger source. That'll be the pshat. She was be a hoilach. You can't be a hoilach because you're dead. We don't hold a person doesn't die. A person lives on. Every person lives on. She should be go to Gan Eden, and she was to what do you call it? to be responsible for us, for all of us, and she preserved to be baby gula of the world.
Ask her son Ephraim to share a few words.
The Rav mentioned that my mother didn't get into fights with people. You might think, so she didn't have what to do with people. You don't get into a fight with them. That wasn't my mother. My mother had to do with everybody. My mother did for everybody. She was on the PTA in the Hebrew Academy. I never heard that there was a problem with anybody in the Hebrew Academy. People came over to me. They said they loved working for my mother to do things. She used to get things done. But it wasn't done that anyone was forced, that anyone had a problem, or anyone had a fight. My mother's life didn't start here in Cleveland. Started in Tachin, Czechoslovakia. She was married there, not to my father, to somebody else. She had a daughter. Both her husband and daughter were killed by the Nazis in Makshmo. We almost never heard anything about it, all the years. My parents tried to make the house a place where we could grow and not be stilted and stunted by what happened in her past. Everything was to look to the future. My mother was a chizuk for all of us. Considering what she went through, and she was still able to build up a house that ran normally. Normally it's not always so easy. I used to tell my children. My son asked me, said, he was getting engaged. He says, what happens if it doesn't work out? I said, take a look at your mother, at my mother. Her first life didn't work out. It didn't stop her. She kept going. My mother was in Auschwitz. They put her in the kitchen peeling potatoes. She was there with her sisters. She and her sister, at the end of the day, used to take potatoes and roll them up in their skirts and take them out to give people what to eat because there wasn't enough to eat. They put their lives on the line for other people. That's probably the schus that she had. And it's something, for her grandchildren to be able to look at how you keep going no matter what. I have to ask Mechila, the name of my wife, my children, because I probably didn't do Kibbut Aveim properly. Malka Hashem Dim Al Kol Pam.
Joey?
Eshes Chal Miyimtza Rochak Mipnina Michra. Accomplished woman who can find. Far beyond pearls is her value. My mother was such a person. Pia Pascha B'Chachma V'Saris Chesed L'Shona. With wisdom, she built her house. She carved out many offspring. Between children and grandchildren, come out 50 offspring, all Shomer Torah, Shomer Shabbos, and Shomer Mitzvahs. I'd personally like to thank the doctors and nurses who took care of my mother in these years, last year, especially last year, last couple months. Especially, I'd like to point out Ebola, who went out of her way, Lifnei Mishus Hadin, to care for my mother, and really did so much more than is expected. A special Akaras Hatov to my brothers Arthur and Shlomi, who took care of my mother since her father's passing, and years before then, while my father was still alive. Both of them are deserving of tremendous zechusim for the love and taking care of all their needs for the last 20 years or more. It was no simple task. My mother was raised in a well-to-do Hasidic home in a shtetl near Satmar. So our rabbi was a frequent visitor to her home, indicating what type of home she was raised in. Although she went through the Holocaust and lost a husband and child, as my brother pointed out, she nonetheless continued her Yiddishkeit from her youth. When my mother was in the work camp, she was assigned to work in the kitchen. Under penalties of death, she would sneak bread and potatoes to her brothers and others. That was my mother, always putting the needs of others, especially family, first. After the war, she met our father in a DP camp where my oldest brother, Frank, was born, and came to New York. There, regardless of how little they had, she continued Harchnas Archim by housing family coming over from Europe until they were able to find a home of their own. Soon after, my parents relocated to Hartford, Connecticut, far different than the type of place she was raised. In Hartford, there were just a handful of Shomer Shabbos people. Only one other child in my school, my class, was Shomer Shabbos. Despite this fact, my mother, together with my father, instilled in my brothers and myself a life of mitzvahs and Torah appreciation, sending us to yeshiva at a very young age so that we could continue Limud Torah in a frum atmosphere, although it was very difficult for her to send her children halfway across the country and only see them a few times a year. My mother always supported my father in all his endeavors. As the chazan in the shul, he often brought home people who did not have a place, a makom suda, for Shabbos. Very often my mother would not know about them until they walked into the door. But always with a smile and love in her heart, she added them to our Shabbos table. When my family moved to Cleveland and my father started the food business, my mother took a job as a dietitian in one of the customers' nursing homes, ensuring. I recently heard a story from a local woman who said that she had an aunt and uncle who were placed in Montefiore at the time would not provide kosher food for them. Our mother was approached to help, and the couple was transferred to the nursing home, which did not serve kosher food, where our mother was personally cooked kosher food for this couple every day so that they could maintain their kashrus. It meant extra work for her, but if she was able to do a mitzvah and help in a situation such as this, she did not hesitate to do so. When my youngest brother was born, my mother once again became involved in his school, serving as president of the PTA, creating a cookbook as a fundraiser and other tasks, even though she was quite a bit older than the typical grade school mother. Family meant everything to my mother. She was extremely close to her three sisters who all survived the camps together. Her younger sister said that they all met up at the camps, although they were coming from different places. At that point, she knew Hashem was with them, as my mother would take care of them. The only vacation my family ever took was to visit relatives. She totally supported my father in all his business endeavors, whether he was traveling on the road for days at a time, working at Pollak Foods, or helping him with social obligations as a chazan. There was nothing she wouldn't do for her children. Her greatest joy was when the children or the grandchildren would come to visit. We'd barely be through the door and she would say, I made you your favorite cheesecake or dessert, come sit down and eat. Make no mistake about it, she was a baker par excellence. I once told my wife that although she was a good baker, she was only at the top of the minors. My mother was the top of the majors. I regret that for many times over, and I'd like to do tshuva for that. There was never a time that we were saying goodbye that she wouldn't say, do you really have to leave already? Can't you stay longer, regardless of how long we had been there? Over the years, we have told my daughter that there was so much to emulate from my mother. She was truly a regal lady. She conducted herself the way royalty does. She never complained. She complimented people. She made everyone special. We cannot remember her ever saying a bad thing about anyone, even if we knew that they had wronged her. My mother was an example of a woman who could rise above anything, losing a wealthy lifestyle, a mother, father, husband, and child in the Holocaust, having to live in a real Golis, a real midbar in Hartford, away from any family and still maintaining dignity, emunah, and a love for Hashem and the Torah. It is my hope that all her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren remember her godless, learn from it, and continue it in her ways as a schus for her. I have no doubt that my mother was zoichet to an arichas yomim of 95 years, a month short, not even a full month, due to the Mesiras Nefesh and chasodim she did in the concentration camps for brothers and sisters, as well as the immense sacrifice my parents endured in bringing up a close family of Sharei Torah mitzvahs. I would like to ask my mother Mechila for not visiting enough, not staying longer, which gave her so much joy in her lifetime.
I'd like to ask Eta Pollak to speak on behalf of the grandchildren.
Thank God, I've had what I consider to be a wonderful life, and I want to give thanks and credit to my grandmother, my Bubby, that many of the happiest and most wonderful moments in my life occurred in her house and with her. They say it's a good fortune that grandparents should have grandchildren grow up nearby them. It's good for them. They're happy about it. Those that say it, I believe, have it 100% backwards. It's the most fortunate thing in the world for grandchildren to be able to grow up near their grandparents, and even great-grandchildren. For my Bubby, being a mother and a grandmother, it was part of her DNA. It was something that, it was the most prominent intrinsic feature of her. Taking the extreme, I remember one example. This was an eyewitness. I was an eyewitness for. In her later years, after my grandfather had died, my Uncle Frank would come in from New York for 3 nights every other week to stay with her, help take care of her. And we were working together, and I remember one time I was over at my grandmother's house late at night, and I was talking with my Uncle Frank about company matters. And my grandmother, she comes into the room, and she says, "Frank, it's time to go to sleep." She turns off the light. My Uncle Frank was 60 years old at the time. He had grandchildren of his own. Throughout my childhood, I would spend about 1 out of every 3 Shabbosim at my grandparents' house. Either my parents would drop me off before Shabbos, or my grandfather would pick me up before Shabbos. My father would often walk down for Mincha, Shabbos day. And my brother Avrami grew old enough, he would join me. We would both go. And if you asked the childhood me why I liked going so much, I would have said then mainly because of the food. My grandmother her cooking was justly famous, and didn't she know it? But I think I might have even tossed in then that I liked being there because of my grandfather singing, his joking around with me, with everyone that was there, the quaint coziness, the calmness of my grandparents' Shabbos table. Everything my grandparents did, they did with a flourish. whether it was davening, storytelling, asking about my little school life, cooking, obviously. I never felt as calm or slept as well anywhere else than my grandparents' house. They were older when I would stay with them, but their spirits, their natures were eternally young. I think they kept each other young with their kibitzing, their socializing, their joking, their butting in with the kids, a little bit of arguing. It's good for the circulation, I'm told. That's what they told me. A little bit of what I'm going to say also would involve my grandfather. They were an absolute joined union. I think their relationship, my grandparents' relationship, was the most prominent features of their lives. They mirrored each other in so many ways. I remember every time I would visit my grandfather, or I would visit my grandparents, and my grandfather was standing outside, first big smile and a kiss, and his first words were, "Go inside, say hello to Bobby." Right? Her first words were, "Did you say hello to Zaidi?" My grandfather, he was the first of them to grow older. That old age really hit. He had never been able to reconcile it that he had gotten old. He used to tell me in amazement, "Yaakov, it's an astonishing thing to grow old." He couldn't believe it had happened to him. And most of the time he ignored that it happened to him, like when he was driving or when he was trying to do anything else he wasn't supposed to do. Bobby was the same way. No matter what her age was, she was the life of the party. She was the master of the house up until the last chapter. I remember one time I was sitting in Young Israel with my grandfather, 16 years ago, and they called up for an aliyah, Mr. Moskowitz, Eddie Moskowitz's father, who was a zaken, and they called him from after. And my grandfather turns to me, and he gave me like a shrug, as if to say, "Are you sure the Gabbai knows what he's doing? That Mr. Moskowitz can handle this?" And then Mr. Moskowitz, he gets up there, and he launched into a very solid bracha. My grandfather looks back at me with like a sidelong glance, as if to say, "Oh, I guess he had more in him than I thought." My grandfather himself was 80 years old at the time, but he wasn't old. Other people could be old, but I'm not old. What did my grandmother say about my grandfather? After he was nifter, one of her friends asked her how long they'd been married for. I think she responded 55 years, and then she immediately added on, and it wasn't long enough. She would tell me oftentimes, nobody loves his children as much as Daddy did. And then she would say, "I'm sure other people say that, and I know it's true for them too, but for your grandfather, it was really true." Rag Garfunkel, in his hesped for my grandfather years ago, he made a very true remark. He said to my grandfather, everything was the best. His children, his nusach and davening, his wife's cooking, his community, his shul, everything was the best. It's a very true observation. My grandmother, my Bobby, she was the same way. Maybe she got it from my Zaidi, or maybe my Zaidi got it from her. I don't know. When you're a child and you're sitting in your grandparents' home on a Yontif night, a young child, and you're up late at night because the adults forgot you're still awake, and you're hearing the unusual zmiris that my grandfather would sing, you're staring at his exotic crystal chandelier, you're thumbing through the old books and the svarim, you're flipping through the photo albums filled with the out-of-fashion clothes, the family barbecues, the shul, the choir pictures, hearing Zaidi telling everybody who would walk in that the Hamek Dover was the best parish. I don't know why anybody reads anything else. You're smelling the food. Your childhood impression isn't that this is the way that it is now, or this is the way it's been for the last few decades, or maybe from when your grandparents were young. To the child, you think this is the way it's been forever, since time immemorial. Maybe the styles have changed, maybe the melodies have changed, but essentially this is the family's experience, this is our people's experience, and this is our life since Har Sinai. I think your parents give you the sense of how things should be done, but your grandparents give you the sense that this is the way they were always done. Bubby, she had this very wry, quaint, humorous style. Her shtick was to play the straight, the understated straight whenever anybody else says something ridiculous. Either my grandfather, or maybe myself, or my father, or any of the uncles, in a way to get them to try to top the ridiculousness the next time. Whenever we were kibitzing, I'll pop out something a little bit funny and outrageous, and Bubby, she would always say, "Yaakov, you're not for every day." That was her great line for me. One of my brilliant antics was to bring up somebody I knew my grandmother didn't have the best opinion of, and I would say, "So Bubby, what do you hear what's going on with so-and-so?" And she would say, "She's not my favorite person." That was her. I always knew what Bubby was thinking about the family. I knew because she would tell me. She would say, "Yaakov, who doesn't like Joey? Everyone likes Joey. Everybody knows Joey. You can't not like Joey. And your father, he always got along with people. But we used to call him Professor Backwards because he forgot everything. He came home from yeshiva with no suitcase. I'd say, Arthur, where's your suitcase? And he'd say, I had a suitcase. Shlomi was a valedictorian at Tel Yeshiva, Yaakov. Did you know that? He's a very smart boy. Frank needs to lose weight. She was very tough on Uncle Frank. I remember I'd say, Bubby, Frank, he's on this careful diet. He's lost a lot of weight. And then she'd say to me, don't tell me about his diet. Now he only eats this and this, and I have to have only this soda in the house because of his stupid diet. It's driving me crazy. And Uncle Frank could never win. Bubby took a huge risk in her life, marrying my grandfather. My Zaidi, I don't believe for her and for her family, represented a safe shidduch. Bubby came from what I call an aristocratic Carpathian Hungarian Sigatur family. Her brothers that survived the war wanted her to marry a similarly mildly Hasidic man from a similar background. My grandfather was not that at all. He came from an arch-Misnagdische, outskirt Budapestian, much more bohemian family. He had a little bit of a wild flair to him. He'd been in yeshiva, but he had also been conscripted into the Hungarian cavalry. And unlike others who had been conscripted, he would never tell you that he didn't enjoy it. He looked at business much more as social fun than as a high-stakes game. He told me, my grandfather told me, very frankly, that my grandmother's family had been against the shidduch. This was in the DP camps, so you can imagine how much of a detour my great-uncles must have thought that the shidduch represented. My Bubby had tremendous pride in her family, she always did, but she didn't hesitate to say yes when my grandfather proposed. I think because she saw that though my grandfather didn't represent the exact image of her family, he was an absolute prince of a yid. So she took an enormous chance, and thanks to that leap, our family now owns 0 real estate in Borough Park, our side. She and Zaidi became the out-of-town branch. So thanks a lot, Bobby, no Borough Park real estate. Instead, we got my grandfather singing "Love You, Love You, Love You" after tucking in the grandkids every Friday night, saying, "You have to have a drink," to all the little kids when he pulled out l'chaim with his schnapps, telling the guests that pleasure was all theirs when they were leaving, saying, "Eat a lot of bread because it's cheaper than meat" when the meal started, singing Impossibly Sweet Nagunim at the table with an artistic feeling that was in his blood, sitting on the front porch with Bubby leisurely spending time together with a smile. That was what Bubby traded for when she took that risk. Bubby had tremendous guts, and she built her family on those guts. Her closest pictures on the table next to her were 3. She had one of her parents, one of my Zaidi learning with my Uncle Shlomi, and then the picture of my grandfather in his cavalry uniform. My merit was to spend time with my Bubby, and that my own children should have spent time with her. Their first bike ride was to her house, their first wagon ride to his house. They went because she gave them all the sodas they could drink. What was Bubby's life made out of? Her children, we all know it. Her dear friends, many not with us anymore, some, Mrs. Vitriol, Mrs. Gottesman, the other Mrs. Gottesman, Mrs. Waxman, Mrs. Rose Epstein, the wonderful Rebbitzins who came to visit her, Rebbitzin Garfunkel, Rebbitzin Katz. These people made her life. On behalf of a grandson who owes a lot to his grandmother, I can say that I absolutely owe a lot to you for giving so much chiyus and shir to my grandmother. Bubby Shul, her community, her barbecues, her Yom Noraim seats next to the Rebbitzins, her life was loaded and rebuilt. To Bubby's in-town children, my father and my Uncle Shlomi, I owe you a great deal of tuition for the graduate level course in Kibbutz Avayim that you've provided me for. You make me nervous that one day I may have to live up to it myself, and I think that apprehension is the only genuine sign that I maybe appreciate a little bit of what you did for your parents. It's your magnum opus dedication to the 6th mitzvah of the Asar Stibris. Also to Buli and Bertha. Bertha's not here, but the care you took from my grandmother was like of a family. Very quick digression. I think my grandmother or grandfather would have liked it. Sighet in Teich was a very interesting region, a very interesting town. It's really unique. There's an old idea that if you want to remember somebody, Jewish idea, that you tell them a halacha before you go, because the person will memorize the halacha will memorize you. Bubby's town, Sighet, was deported in the summer of 1944. Very few people lived through it. I know of about 3 of them outside the family. One of them was a boy at the time. His name was Dov Weiss. My father knows who that is. That was my brother. He's about 10 years younger than Bubby. and he was staying at a house of another Sigator named Yechiel Horowitz. Yechiel Horowitz turned to Dov Weiss. Yechiel Horowitz was older, wealthy man, children in America. And he said to him, he said, I have no illusions about where we're headed. We in the town are headed. This is Sigit's last stand. And what's going to carry on from the town, I don't know. But you may live. Maybe you will. I don't know what you'll do with your life, but you may live. I want to tell you a piece of Torah, and maybe I'll be remembered through that Torah that you tell over to my family. And it's a truly Hungarian piece of Torah, the idea that he gave over. And here's what he said before the last transport. Is famous question, Parshas Miketz. The brothers are dragged back to Yosef. Yosef has planted the goods on them. They come into the courtyard. Yosef comes out and said, thieves! Yehuda says back to them, we're not thieves. And if we are thieves, and if you find something in one of our sacks, let the brother whose sack you found it in, he'll be killed. The rest of us will be taken as slaves. And Yosef says, whoa. Too tough. The brother whose sack we find something in, he'll be a slave until the debt's paid off. The rest of you will go free. The way he says it, though, is strange. He says, now again, let's do like what you said. The brother whom the sack is found in, and everybody asks over the years, what now again? What do you mean now again, like what you said? When did they ever have a question? When did they ever have discussion, Yehuda and Yosef, about such a matter? So Yechiel Horowitz says, I understand it now. Here's what was going on. According to the Medrash, it wasn't just jealousy that drove the brothers to ship off Yosef. It was a halachic dispute. It was lashon hara to their father Yaakov over the Aver Menachai. If you shech the animal and you find a vlad inside, you have to shech the vlad. Jewish law, you don't. Goyim do. Right? And the brothers, held by Jewish law. Yosef ratted on them to Yaakov, and the brothers decided to ship him off. Seems a little superficial, right? Just form different shoals, right? That should be the obvious solution, pragmatic. And Yechiel says it's more political than that, because the real argument was, do we hold by the ideals of Torah without the formalization, or do we do what's expedient, right? It's prior to Ma'amad Har Sinai. Torah hasn't been given yet. The law of the land of the time was stricter than us. Aver Menachai included the Vlad. So Yosef said, let's be expedient. We're not formalized yet. The brother said, no, we need the ideals. Yosef goes to his father, and the brother said, Yosef's going to talk Yaakov into it. We're never going to make it to Ma'amad Har Sinai if we don't maintain the ideals. We'll die, and our children will be lost. So they need to ship him off. So what happens? Yosef goes to Mitzrayim, and the brothers stay in Mitzrayim, and Yaakov is distraught, and Shimon and Levi kill out Shechem, and now, years later, they're sitting in front of Yosef, and Yosef accuses them of a crime, and Yehuda, he says, too much. We've done to Yaakov too much. Yosef was right. We need to be expedient. We need to fit with the times. We shipped off Yosef. We have depressed our father. We killed out a city. We need to fit in with the times until we get to a point where we can formalize a community again. And Yosef, though, he's seen the other side. He's seen what Mitzrayim is like from the inside. So he switched his opinion too. Yehuda and Yosef have switched their opinions. And Yosef says back to him, no, Yehuda, I didn't like the result, but what you said before was right. We need to live with our ideals, because otherwise we're not going to make it. And Yechiel says, he says to Dov, he says, remember this is Sigit. This is what people from Sigit says. Whether a community comes out or whether Yechidim come out, reconstitute. And this is what my grandmother did. It's what my grandfather did. Sigit is no more. A house in Hartford, Connecticut, there's other people living in it. Harwood, there's somebody else. Larchmont is now empty. My grandfather would sometimes tell me, he said, Yaakov, it's an amazing thing. In the old country, I never saw somebody become Bat Tshuva. We lost a lot of people, but nobody ever came back. And I remember thinking, it's too big a question for me, Zaidi, but I wonder if those people who went off had grandparents as good as you and Bobby. The family that we are now, my children, all the cousins, we don't remember Bobby. We're built from Bobby and her legacy. And I want to say thank you for that.
Shlomi.
I say? There's a mitzvah. Mitzvah lahat b'des ha-meis k'roi loi. Zui michayvas ha-yorshim v'akroigim. It's brought down in the Paiskim that it's a mitzvah b'masbid k'roi, and that obligation is upon the relatives and the kids. I have to admit, as a Ben Zikunim, I really didn't know my mother so well. And I don't think I'm capable of being Maspid Karoi. It says in this past week's parsha, Bonim atem la'Hashem Elokeichem lo yisiskoidedu, Kiam kadosh, continues Kiam kadosh ato la'Hashem Elokeicha. We're children of Hashem, and therefore we can't cut ourselves, because we are an Am Kodesh to Hashem. The Ibn Ezra writes, and it's brought down in the Ramban, Al tiskoidedu al ma sheyase ki kol asher yase l'toivu. We shouldn't cut ourselves, because whatever occurs to us in life is for the good. V'im loi tivineu kasher lo yavinu habonim ketanim ma'isavim rak yismechu alav kein tasu gam atem. Just like just like a little child doesn't understand why his parents do things, so too Hashem does for us, and we don't understand. And that's the chiddush of Banim. The only thing is, at 51 years old, I'm still that cotton who never was able to appreciate and be able to fully grasp the greatness that has been mentioned about my mother. As has been mentioned, my mother was from a different generation. She was from Europe. She had a different set of values, which, as much as she imbued in all of us, but I don't think I was ever able to totally gain that. Hopefully we'll maybe gain eventually those set of values. Rashi in Berkowitz-Kumin-Bookatz says, well-known Rashi, brings the Gemara in Erechim, that we know that the difference between as a man grows older and a lady grows older, that their erech becomes closer to each other. The Amri Inshi, Savta bevesa, Sima bevesa, Simona Tova bevesa. That when a grandmother's in the house, then there's Sima bevesa, means that there's a good simon in the house. My family, all of us in general, but my family in particular, was very fortunate. They have Ma, Bobby, for Eitz of a Tushia for so many years. We were in particular fortunate after the B'tir of my father. Bobby used to come to our house very often for Shabbosim. And it was a big treat. As at the end of our meal, we always learned Shmir Shabbos Kil Chasa, and invariably, through the halacha, it would rekindle memories of my mother's childhood of growing up in Teich. And I was zeiche, my mother in these little snippets was mechanech, our family. As was mentioned previously also, she was a Balas Chesed. It says in Eishes Chayil, Kamu Vaneo Vayashrua, Bailo Vayahalila. Even though my father is not here, but my father told me that how his shidduch came about, which Yaakov, I think also the family mentioned, that when the shidduch was mentioned to my father regarding marrying Ma, that his brother Runchi had told him that he should do the shidduch because he had seen the chesed that my mother had done in the concentration camps, and as was detailed by my brothers and by Yaakov, that chesed indeed, my father never told me that chesed, but the chesed indeed was that how she risked her life, and
even though in the kitchen she wasn't supposed to be giving out food for the Yiddish workers, that as was detailed, taking it through her skirt, risking, and together with her sisters, that she saved men. And indeed, a man in later years came over to, I think it was to my parents, possibly to my aunt, and told them indeed that without my mother he would never have survived the concentration camps. He would have died from starvation. She was a Balas Chesed. Pasuk says, "Vayu." It's a well-known word. "Vayu chayei Sarah mea shana, ve'esrim shana, ve'sheva shanim shnei chayei Sarah." Rashi says on the pasuk, why does it elaborate on the and give the years individually? Mea shana, esrim shana, sheva shanim. So Rashi, kulam shavim l'toiva. They were all equally good. The Welt fragt, this was, and really Rabbi Garfunkel spoke to this previously, that Sarah's years, how could we say they were good? She went through the Medrash, enumerates many tzaras. She had tzaras Paroi, tzaras Avimelech, tzaras Yishmael, tzaras Hagar. How could it be they were Shalom L'Tova? She endured so much, having to go down to Mitzrayim. She was taken away from her husband. And it happened with Avimelech, and it happened, and on, and she didn't have Yitzchak until 9 years old. How could it be Kulam Shavim L'Tova? So the Mefarshim answered Taka that even though things were difficult, but Sarah's perspective was the Kulam Shavim L'Tova. They were all for one Tachlis. They were all for the purpose of serving Hashem, and whatever nisyonis he gave, they were all Shavim L'Tova. So too by our mother, it was the same midah. Kulam Shavim L'Tova. I don't think we remember any time that my mother ever gave a krechts about how life was, or the hand that was dealt to her. My mother, Adarabba, as was said at length, Baruch Hashem, we were fortunate to live in a happy house, in which my mother was tremendously proud of her children and grandchildren, and of her family in general. Was indeed, Bonim Atem Lashem Alekeichem, even though she endured so much, she never questioned that my brother said that she had lost her family, but it was always, just because we don't understand, we don't question, and live weiter. Emunah, people, the topic of Emunah is elaborated very much in terms of the elusive goal of having Emunah and imbuing it in our children. But truth be told, it wasn't something that was really mentioned or stressed in the house too much. It was a given. It's brought down in the Rishonim, Banim Atem Lashem Alekeichem Lois is guided, like we said, that one shouldn't cut. But the Rishonim bring down, but Bechia, the crying, that is okay. The difference between Bechia and Misguidedim, the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Gifter Zatzal explained, is that the Bechia is when we cry from when we're separated from a loved one. But Misguidedim cutting is when it goes too far and we show that we don't have the ultimate one who loves us, the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's a Yesod in Emunah that we have, that we know that the Rebbeinu Shalom loves us. About 13 and a half years ago, when my father was ill, close to the end of his life, so I remember the doctors had given us the prognosis. My father was suffering from Yana Machla in the prostate, and it was a struggle for us to try to deliver to my mother that prognosis. So we all shied away from telling it to my mother. So as I tried to gently explain it in the most positive of terms, my mother interrupted me. She said, Shlomi, I went through the camps. Eber will, ken. That's called the Shayr Shem. Vonim atem Hashem Elokeichem. We don't have to understand. As also everyone mentioned, really, she was a tremendous Murav Mabrius. The Mishnah in Ava says, Hu haya omer, kol sheruach habrius neicha imenu, ruach hamokim neicha imenu. Ma'am, you were very popular socially. Like was mentioned, you're PTA president in the academy, which tremendous accomplishment. As my brother mentioned, in spite of being older, having a language barrier, coming from a different culture, but that warmth and that Ruach Habriyas Neicha Imenu accomplished tremendously. There's some sefer that's brought down on the pasuk in Parshas Bamidbar. It says, "Nodov aviu mesu ubonim loihoyu lohem." Some sefer says that the reason why Nodov aviu mesu, because bonim loihoyu lohem, it says that sometimes people may not, as they get older, they may not have the for whatever reason, there may be a proper time for their ptira. But yet they are zeicha tanarichas yomim because they have children and they live for others, and because others rely on them. I remember my mother really, as everybody said, really was so proud of my father and everything he did and accomplished. And indeed, after his patira, my mother gave us the distinct impression that she really didn't want to go on without him. But yet, in order to raise us as children, Einakluch and Orek and Einakluch, and to be able to impart on us her values, she was Zeicha Tarichas Yamin, that we were fortunate enough to gain from her Eitz V'Tushiyah. Chinuch is a very big topic also, the elusive wanting to be mechanech our children correctly. But what can I say? My parents were the best mechanechim in the world. They gave us self-esteem. No matter what we did, what we accomplished, what we didn't accomplish, they always said in front of us, always told over to people that she had the best children in the world. But truth be told, we had the greatest mother in the world. Ma, please be meichel us for not giving you nearly enough kavod or fulfilling the mitzvah of kibbut avayim b'miluay. Please be a melitza yosher for all of us and for all of Klal Yisrael. Bila amoves l'netzach u'mocha Hashem lakim dima mi'al kopon.
Please rise for the Kilma Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Shaychain Bameromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechoina, Al Kampei Ashechina, B'ma'alois Kedoshim Utarim Gezora Kiyam Asirim, Es Nishmas, Esther Bas Avram, Shalachal Yoilama, Babur Shanachnu Mispalim Badaskaras Nishmasa, Began Eden Temenuchasa, Lochem Balarachamim, Yasira B'Seser Kenafav Li'olamim, Bitzror Achaim Es Nishmasa, Adonai hu nachal asaf, v'sanuach v'shalom al mishkava, v'naymar, amen. You may be seated. The Kfur will be in the Young Israel section of Zion Memorial Park. Shiva will be at the Pollak home, 2566 Larchmont Road, starting this afternoon or this evening. The schedule for Minyanim is as follows. Starting tonight, Min Chamar, the entire week will be at 8 p.m. Shachris, Monday, Thursday, and Friday will be at 7:15. Tuesday and Wednesday, which is Rosh Chodesh, Shachris will be at 7 a.m. Okay, so we'll do the Kriya afterwards. So.